BazBall.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's in the dictionary.
Is it?
It's in the Collins dictionary.
Good.
Apparently so, yeah.
Good. Did India kill BazBall?
So I talked to Raul Drummer for my next book. This can be talking about my books everywhere. And I was talking to him about BazBall and how he went up against it. And they were convinced it wouldn't work in India, right? And then Ollie Pope played his innings and they were like, oh my God, maybe it will work. We didn't think Ollie Pope would get any runs and he's smashing us everywhere, right? So they eventually overcame it. But I didn't get the feeling from Raul Drummer that he thought that there was no merit in it going ahead. I think he just thought they were the better team in the better conditions, and eventually, when England would play a silly shot, instead of it going for 4, it went straight up in the air, right? And I think you look at it from a strategic, way, and there's a lot of things that make a lot of sense. The problem is now that I think a lot of other teams are taking some of the best parts of BazBall and using it themselves. And England still have that same fundamental flaw they had when Brendan McCullum brought it in, which is they don't have a lot of guys who can average 45 in Test cricket. And eventually, having a bunch of guys who can score 38 with a 78 strike rate is still not going to be able to help you. So I think there's a limitation to it, but I think it's already changed the way that people think about Test cricket. And so I don't think India killed the concept of it. I just think other teams will take it and use it in different ways going ahead.
It did seem like England almost sounded like they were wavering on the concept of BazBall by the end of that series, though, didn't it?
No,
if you listen to Rob Key and
I think
Stokes and McCullum, that they might need to change a few things.
I think by the end of it, like they have done many, many times, to reevaluate what went wrong with it. And I think some of they could have made smarter decisions. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing. This for me, I don't like the term BazBall. I think it's a bit of a myth of, everybody thinks, it's reckless, it's hitting 6s and 4s. It's not. It's trying to free your mind of being doubt and negativity and trying to express your talent on the opposition and not have any doubt on your position, because you've seen, a lot of these players, and as Jarrod's saying there, from my point of view, it's like players have got average 38. The average 38, and lower, and their place is not really in jeopardy. Zach Crawley at another time would have been dropped about 4 times, brought back and dropped, brought back and dropped. But because of the way this mentality is between Stokes, McCullum, and Key, is we back you to be the best cricketer, best version of yourself. So go out and try and be the best version of yourself. And if you make a mistake, then as long as you don't keep making that same mistake, we'll keep backing you. And I think from that point of view, I think that's a good thing. I think you'll get rewarded. I think this team is gearing up towards the Ashes. I still think we're maybe 1, possibly 2 players short for when we get to Australia, but that might come out of the woodwork over the course of the next 18 months. I thought they played some excellent cricket in India. I thought they give India some real headaches, but then all of a sudden when you get to a point and you go, oh no, they've done it again. But how many times we see a crash of wickets, and I think that's the problem. I think sometimes the situation and the reading the room could be reined in a little bit, but you can't have everything in an ideal world. And I think the way these red ball players play now, I think is far better than what it was in the previous regime under Silverwood and Root and everything like that. So I think I don't think India killed BazBall. I think India played the better cricket in their own back garden and probably made smarter decisions under pressure, better than England. But I think there was definitely times during them 5 Test matches where England give India a real headache. And there's not many teams go to India and play like that. In India.
It should have been 2-2 going to fifth Test.
It could have been anything because England made the whole series so variable, right?
Yeah.
But I think BazBall is 3 different things.
Go.
So I think it's strategically, they make a lot of strategic smart moves, like batting down the wicket, right? And saying to you, you don't have a length anymore, fast bowler. You now have to decide what you're going to do. And if you're a spinner, you now have to decide what you want to do with your field, because I'm going to hit you, I'm going to reverse sweep you, and I'm going to sweep you. So straight away, there's 2 sweepers out. And then once you do that, I'm going to whack one down, and you're going to have to make a third decision. A lot of that strategic stuff makes a lot of sense, right? The second part of it is the players like playing it because it's a positive environment, and most cricket environments aren't. Cricket is defined by failure, right? Bowlers fail to take wickets ball after ball, and most batters fail to make 50 runs in most innings, right? Having that freedom, those two things are really good. The third part, though, was the cult of BazBall, right? Where England started believing that they were changing cricket forever. Where, you know, that thing of Ben Duckett of like, look, we've inspired Jaiswal to bat this way, like, you know, or all that sort of stuff. And they, so many times when I think they've made an error, like the declaration in the Ashes test, and you know some of the other mistakes, where you're just like, oh, you guys just are believing the hype rather than taking the best bit out of your great new mantra and using it. You're just like, we can do nothing wrong, and eventually the bubble was going to burst, right? When they started, they did it on really weird English wickets with very soft duke balls. They also did it against teams who didn't know how to react to it, right? You go back, I was watching the ball-by-ball coverage of the Bairstow-Stokes partnership at Trent Bridge. New Zealand just lost the plot, right? Because that's not how teams went against it. Slowly, those teams worked out, oh, okay, we can do this. And by the end, New Zealand were playing quite well at times against England when they were doing that. So I think if you take all the best bits out of it, it still makes a lot of sense. But you go back to Harmy's original point of, if these guys aren't averaging over 38, right? They're still not going to be putting as much pressure on as other players who are playing defensively who are averaging 45. It's still, eventually you need to make more runs, right? And I don't know how England do that, but there's so many good parts of BazBall, but I do think there's a little bit of drinking the Kool-Aid at times, where everyone needs to be like, we don't actually need to take the most aggressive option every time. We need to take the right option. And maybe that is 6 times out of 10, the most aggressive one. 2 times out of 10, that might be a neutral one. And I'm just going out there, just occasionally, a defensive option might also work for them. They don't have to just keep pressing the turbo button until they run out of turbo.
I think about on that, there's a couple of things on that. I think the teams that played against England second time are the teams that understood that this is the way England's playing and don't have this sort of Dean Elgar, well, West Africa, they'll not do it against us. You know, India did it when they came over for that one-off test match. The teams that understand it and try and not allow it to happen, but to play alongside it are the ones that have played England the best.
Yeah.
I think that's when you've as a group, you've just gone, hold on, if we just go with this, we'll learn how to play against it and we'll let them make the mistake to go. I think structurally, I think we're 1 or 2 players short. We're a number 3 short. Because I think we've got 3 or 4 players that want to bat number 4, number 4, 5 or 6. I think having a number 3 would be somebody that bats not un-BazBall way, but somebody that can. I think if Joe Root was to bat number 3, I think England would be in a far better place than Ollie Pope batting number 3. Because I think Joe's technique's a lot more sound, and I think his temperament, understanding of the game, he's one of the greatest players that's ever played. But he wants to bat number 4. I think we've got a lot of players in that team, and I think we're good players in that team. I just think we're one, solid player short when we go to Australia. I think that's a big thing. And I think the ones that the example you're mentioning in averaging 38, I think we need a bowling attack that can bowl teams out quickly. Yeah. And I think that, as Jimmy and Brodie's got a bit older and we lose in fast bowlers hand over fist, I think that's where we will come up short. We came up short in India because we didn't have a Jasprit Bumrah, we didn't have a R. Ashwin, we didn't have a Ravindra Jadeja. If we had them playing that way, I think England would have possibly beat India. So I think going into Australia, and Rob Key's talking about fast bowlers, wanting to have pace. I think now playing the way they're playing, the next step for me is, I think it's more solid number 3. Ollie Pope does brilliantly in England, but I think a more solid number 3, who's naturally a number 3, rather than probably Pope wants to bat 4. Superb player. You've got Brook, who probably would want to bat 4. You know, they all want to bat that 4, 5, 6.
And then the home and away bowling attack.
Exactly, and I think that bowling attack, if you get Archer fit, going well. If you get, like in 2005, you get Mark Wood in the Simon Jones era way of, can we get him for 4 out of 5 test matches? And you kept Archer for 4 out of 5 test matches. For me, that's got to be England's goal going over to Australia, because I think England can compete with Australia in Australia if they've got a consistent barrage of fast bowlers. I think they can compete with them playing this way. But they've got to take wickets quickly. And that, for me, is why the whole narrative is about cooker the ball and playing and developing fast bowlers. Because now I think the next step for BazBall is we've got to take wickets quickly. And if a team gets a big score, then we're always going to make mistakes, because BazBall it's going to get 500 quickly, but it's not going to get 500 every time. I don't think it's a consistent thing, but it makes for better watching. I think it puts pressure on the opposition, and it makes the opposition possibly think about making mistakes, where sometimes it does look times, and it did in India, it did look reckless.
How do you think Australia are going to go about combating BazBall? Because it seemed like they were starting to lose the plot towards the end of the 2023 Ashes.
Oh look, I think they started in good form and probably lost it a little bit. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think they're going to change all that much. Pat Cummins is a naturally defensive captain. You watch him for the Sunrisers. You watch him for Australia. I know he's not doing the World Cup at the moment, but he's a pretty pragmatic captain. He's going to do the same thing. He's going to have boundary riders, and he's going to try and weird it out. The thing is that they are going to think they have a huge advantage, because they don't think that England's going to be able to bowl them out in Australia. So they're not going to be as worried by Zach Crawley making 70 off 70 balls, because they're like, well, Crawley's eventually going to give us a chance. We'll get him out. They might make 320, we'll make 500. And it's up to Australia then to be able to do that. Australia's batting is weird as well. Steve Smith is an opening batter now, right? Usman Khawaja is really old. They're starting to age out, and they've got a bunch of very attacking players in their middle order, like Head and Marsh, which is almost BazBall, where they've just let those guys be themselves after years of trying to train both of them to be different kinds of players. So they will back themselves to be able to make big scores against England, and they will think they'll be able to at least restrain them with the boundary riders again. I don't think we'll see anything that far out from Australia. They just think they're going to be a better team at home than England are.
Yeah, I don't think, from Australia's point of view, at this minute in time, if I was in that camp, I wouldn't be losing any sleep England coming over at this minute in time. I think a little bit like it has been the last summer, was in the winter from England's point of view. The batting's not a problem, I don't think. It's the bowling. If England can, like talking about getting that prime racehorse ready for the big race, and ready for the Grand National, if England can get a fast bowling unit or a bowling unit to go to Australia to compete, England have a chance. If they go over there and Archer's injured, Wood's injured, Atkinson, who's going to probably play this summer, one or two others, then England don't. For me, then they don't have a chance. If they've got bowlers, they can do it. If in India, England's bowling attack was what the difference between England having a chance of winning in India or losing 4-1, and that for me is why the narrative of cooker the ball, fast bowling, because that's how we win. I don't think they'll have a problem with the batting unit. I think England's batting unit on Australian pitches will stand up with Australia's batters at this minute in time. Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Lyon, and that's a different conversation altogether. If we go over there with Wood, Archer, Ian Other, who's going to come out of the woodwork in the not too distant future, who's going to replace Anderson, whether it's Sam Cook, whether it's Dylan Pennington, whether it's Matt Potts, who is probably going to get their chance in the early part. But if Wood and Archer are fighting fit and primed, ready to go for the first Test match over in Australia, I think there's a contest on. But I think without them too, I'm not sure England have the firepower to compete with what Australia have got. And you've got to throw Stokes in there bowling as well. But for me at this moment in time, it's exciting times watching this England red ball team, because it gets you on the edge of your seat. It really does. And the biggest thing I struggle with, and I find BazBall will never be the perfect game, because they will always make mistakes. In 10 years' time, if they're still playing it, they will always make mistakes. Zach Crawley will get out for 70 trying to hit the biggest drive possible, because that's the way they play and that's the way he does. But I'd rather see him go and do that, because I think his ceiling level's great, and he will win more games than hopefully he'll lose further down the line. Duckett's starting to become established. I worry about the number 3, the rest of it from a batting unit. And I'm not worried about Ollie Pope, because I think Ollie Pope's a fantastic player. I just don't think he's a number 3. But I think 4, 5, 6, and if they get the wicketkeeper spot sorted by the time they get to Australia. I think there's still a few question marks, but I think England have got what it takes to go over and give Australia a game.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.